like.
They're not part of the contract.
We're still on the cycle, or we got around 2:30.
Well, I wrote a letter to the minister yesterday about a number of things, but I
They're around 6 o'clock.
this plan doesn't include us at all. It's not working for
I
us,
wonder
so
what that is, eh? I did that one time.
what can we
We
do?
got 3 months.
We can't work with the SCRD and BC Transit.
Read the paper.
Read the paper, yeah. Check again.
I used to.
Clearly,
So I can't
it
pick
doesn't
that
answer
one.
it yet.
No, I sent it yesterday afternoon. I expect an answer by the end of the day.
Sit
Oh,
around.
nice.
No, I'm just joking. Probably never get one, but I did
Try to
say
stay up
we are trying to
to
set
sleep
up a
at
meeting.
like 9 or 10 o'clock, but
Well, you
it's,
didn't answer me back on the rest. Who's going?
it's so boring.
I know.
Oh, well, it's what Christine needs to,
I've been waking up and then reading.
I thought I said, I don't know, I don't have anybody, but
Oh,
is
thank you.
Jason coming is the question, right?
Pardon me?
I don't know. Yeah, I just ran a head count.
Well, GA,
Mm-hmm.
who's coming to the next meeting? There you go. And so, we, good to go online before we close? I guess we have to do.
Yes.
So I will, I'll call this meeting to order, this committee of the whole. Use this, I'll call the meeting to order of the committee of the whole of the town of Gibsons, March 21st, 2023. And we are honored to be gathered here on the traditional territories of the Squamish Nation. We have first need an approval of the agenda. And soon after that, we do need to close, unfortunately, so, but that's the, thanks for coming for this 5 seconds, Cale. I've got a motion from Councillor Kroll, seconded by Councillor Thompson. All those in favor? So that, to approve the agenda, and now we need a motion to close. Councillor Kroll.
The contractor, when you released the pre-con plans for the deck, scaled the measurements off the drawings. And we scaled the inside measurement, not the outside. So when the slabs arrived, and rigged the frame when they worked them into place, they went to lower the first one in place and it just sank down into the foundation. They were like 16 inches too short.
Oh, that's horrible.
Folks, we're live to see.
Maybe twice, cut it once.
We're live. You're live again. Let's have a look. Yes.
Yeah, this is a lot of chairs. Dangerous.
Just a head from here, floating head.
Okay. So is there any? We have our recommendations there. This is kind of just our final committee crack at setting our general operations and capital budget. I don't know if there's any, I've got a little bit to just talk, I mean, I think I talked to Lorraine about where we, just confirming where we come up with that last, was it like a 0.1% or something that we talked about last time?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, it's 0.4%. It's basically $14,000 that are not, is not quite, not yet funded, so some adjustments have to be made for that.
Yeah, so, and we did talk last time about the police victim services and restorative justice and how, at least in my view, and the way I read the arrangements about traffic fine revenue in particular, that should be coming from traffic fine revenue that the District of Sechelt may be getting, or maybe the province of BC is getting. But we aren't entitled to it because we aren't over 5,000, and yet we're being asked to pay for something that we don't actually have the funding to do. And traffic fines that are leveled in the Gibsons area likely end up going to the District of Sechelt. But maybe they're going to the province as well, but I'm pursuing finding out where they are going. And the District of Sechelt's getting, I forgot that I had that number at my fingertips last time, but it's well over $100,000. So that's I think where we should be pursuing that money, and that was understanding I had even at I think back when I was at the SCRD, so 8 years ago, I think that was some understanding, but clearly that collective memory was lost at some point. And, so that's I think that's an area where I think we can take that down and seek that funding elsewhere. And another one that I know Councillor Lumley's brought up in the past is the tourism. Sunshine Coast Tourism now has revenues of over $500,000, and through different sources, but those are meant to supplement the funding from government, current funding from government, and I've read up on this as well. But I think we could find, if we're looking at that grants and donations area, which is quite discretionary by council, that's an area we could bring down to maybe 2,000 from 7,200 to come up with some funds. And thirdly, one that I've been thinking about as well, which I learned from our Director of Finance yesterday, is both GPAG and the Hospice Society are continuing to apply for grants and aid, even though they have line items. So I feel like I don't know, Councillor Kroll's brought this up in the past too. It's like you kind of need to pick one or the other. And if they want to keep applying for grants and aid, maybe they shouldn't have line items. I would just put that out to council, because the idea of putting them under lines is that you've got a line item, you don't need to apply for grant and aid, but they're still applying for grant and aid. So that's another $6,700 there that council could look at in coming up with this 14,000 under some discretionary funds that we have. So I'll look to council to further discuss. Councillor Kroll, did you want to?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just with respect to hospice, we introduced the $1 per person last year in our budget for hospice, which I think works out to whatever the current census figure is at the moment. Following that, though, they did apply under a new project for a grant and aid, and we did give it to them. But we haven't, I agree that they are getting the line item, as is the case with the Gibsons Public Art Gallery. They get the permissive tax credit. So, I fully agree. Under the terms of grant and aid, they're supposed to be new projects. They're not supposed to be a continuing thing, which is why we did move to support hospice under the budget line. So
Okay.
you mentioned 67. That was a cumulative figure between what they had received as a line item.
No, that's them and GPAG. GPAG's
Okay.
2,000. Any other thoughts on this? Basically, what I proposed yesterday was to remove the 10,710. Pursue that through the traffic fines that some accumulate somewhere regionally, but they certainly aren't shared with us because we aren't over 5,000. And then moving the tourism down to perhaps 2,000. And I thought that was something that Councillor Lumley has proposed in the past. Councillor Kroll?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the restorative justice, as I recall, that's supposed to be a match funding. And if I recall going into the background of that, what we are supposed to pay and what we actually do pay is we weren't currently matching funding. We did increase the budget amount to bring it a little more in line with what it should be, but we were still way short. So my question really is, what happens if we find out that we can't fund it out of traffic funding? But we are obligated contractually to match funding, which we weren't doing in the first place. So I'm just wondering, should we put that money aside and just in case we don't recover it out of traffic?
We'll have to find 14,000 somewhere else, so that's the only challenge if we want to do a 6.5. Correct? Yeah.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just to follow up, for any changes that you make today, if you found that, say, one item you removed later on that we're required to match, we could always, council could authorize that through a council resolution. We could use a type of reserve funding, and then it could be brought back in next year's budget. So that helps.
Councillor Thompson?
Through you, Mayor, thanks for that, Lorraine. That gave some clarity on removing that line item. I'd be very reluctant to remove the Hospice Society line item. But looking, if we are at that 10,710, based on that information that you just provided, and we looked at the portion of tourism, we're there, aren't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay. Councillor Lumley?
Yeah, I totally agree. I also had a long conversation with David Love is his name, and Hospice Society is I guess at some point, I guess back in the last term when I learned that hospice was not funded in BC, although other provinces fund it, and then I've made a few donations just from my own business towards hospice, but I guess I just became the unofficial advocate. I may sit on the committee that's going to look at, they want to raise $4 million and for 8 beds, 8 more beds on the Sunshine Coast. So anyway, like I spoke to them, they have a $2 million bursary if they can raise another $2 million. So I'd suggest leaving the line item as we discussed, and then just not having them at grants and aid, because they are doing a campaign and we can help them in other ways, not just like they're going to be raising a lot of money. So, I don't think it's necessary to have them in grants and aid, but it is necessary to keep them as a line item. So,
Okay. Councillor Kroll?
Thank you, Mayor Wood. We did bring forward a motion to UBCM that other municipalities support us in the provincial government being petitioned to support hospice, as is the case in other provinces. So, to Councillor Lumley's point, certainly keeping the line item and just reminding them that they don't qualify for grant and aids at this point. But I think it is important that we do sort of keep the feet to the fire and with the acknowledgement that we are supporting them.
On the line item, yeah, okay. And it is, it's a topic I'm working on too with advocacy related to the hospital board and related to, I've got my next letter to go out. I've been churning out letters every day, trying to catch up on our our advocacy goals, but the next one's to the Minister of Health, and this is certainly one of the items I'll be bringing up. Councillor DeAndrade.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I agree with maintaining the hospice, and I'm glad you're looking for solutions to find the 14,000, because my first thought was we cannot increase the taxes over 6.5, so this is the limit. And staff propose a solution if we don't find, which is one of the solutions is reduce taxation funding requirements in operations, perhaps for this term.
Thank you, Councillor DeAndrade. So I'm just looking at this email earlier today too. We may need clarification on our previous direction about the grants as well, to whether it was by or to 10,000. It's only a matter of $710, but oh no, that's the wrong one. 808. And that was a previous motion about the. So I just want clarity from staff whether the inflation to grants and aid was actually something that was put into the policy, or that was a motion.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So that was, check the policy, and that's a motion as separate, so it wasn't put into the policy. So the policy at the time was some changes about number of times an organization can apply to grants of assistance, and that the maximum be 10% of the budget. And the resolution had the budget be increased by 2%. And so it didn't amend the policy, but it just gave direction on budget. And so that's what the 808 is. That's the 2% since that came in, because the budget used to be 20,000. And so I had heard or interpreted the reduction by 10,000, hence the 10,808. But council today could change it to 10,000 and and then adjust the 2% if you want to.
It's not much of a difference, but I would see it as being moving it down to 10,000 and keeping it there on an ongoing basis, just like the other line items are. Really, especially when we're looking at into the future here, we're needing to find money for policing here, and having kind of a 2% annual increase or cost of living increase for anything is probably not the priority to me in these next few years, because we're behind the 8 ball. So I don't see any disagreement with that, but that's kind of what others' understanding was too. So just I'll move that we clarify that we are reducing the grants of assistance budget to 10,000 per year on an ongoing basis. Seconded by Councillor Lumley. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? That motion carries. And do we need to clear up the direction on the other two as well? So that we reduce the victim services and restorative justice budget to 0 and pursue those funds elsewhere. And further, that we reduce the tourism budget to 2,000 on an ongoing basis. Seconded by Councillor Lumley. In discussion? All those in favor? That motion carries. So I think we're at our 6.5 now. Do we need anything else? And also, I wanted to also just bring up the fact that we kind of finished off yesterday by talking about the grant, or the new grant of $2.314 million. And we did put some of that into the centrifuge, but our Director of Infrastructure Services and Director of Finance are going to work on a report about other possibilities in the future. And this is another opportunity where councillors can bring up some ideas of what we would like to have looked at. Correct? Yeah. And also there may be some follow-up questions on other items in the capital budget that we could entertain today too. That this is our last chance to do it. So, Director of Finance.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, before you move on to any sort of general capital discussions, the two recommendations at the front of my report, those are the recommendations that confirm that the tax increase is 6.5% based on all the discussions you've had to date, and that it gives me direction to start preparing the financial plan. So those would be requested for today if possible, and then that goes to that would go to the March 28th meeting on Tuesday. At that time, I could present a brief report to council, a final budget presentation to council and public that shows what the budget looks like, so, okay.
Okay. Are we ready to pass that motion? Okay. Councillor Thompson moves it. Councillor Kroll seconds. The motion is written in front of us with a 6.5% increase. Any more discussion on that? All those in favor of the motion? That motion carries. So are there any other questions on capital projects? I think Director of Infrastructure Services is with us. 3 participants I see on the bottom right. I don't know if he came back.
I am here,
Okay.
Mr. Mayor. Yep.
Yeah, I took some notes actually from reading over our public input survey as well on the budget and strategic plan. I thought that would be helpful in just making sure we're considering. I mean, I think some of the items that the public has brought to us are obviously not items that are like shovel ready that we can do in a year, but that we could be considering at least over the term. I think the one that probably came up the most in the survey was further work to the treatment plant, which would be the scent control issue. And I know we've discussed that before, and I have a concern with that it might not be a surefire fix. But I wonder if that's. I'll just ask again, since it came up in the survey, and since we're talking about capital projects now, and probably won't be for another year. If that one might be considered as part of the grant expenditures as an option anyway, and what work staff would need to do to kind of come up with the possibilities there.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, based on the description that we've received, a bit more detail outlining what kind of falls within the grant program. Certainly improvements to the wastewater treatment plant, such as odor control, would fall within the applicable funding. I've not personally read any of the reporting that we received from the engineering that occurred last year, but I believe there's a study with recommendations for how to proceed. So in order for staff to take that forward, it would be revisiting with the engineers to just confirm if there's any outlying questions and pursuing pricing and contracting to carry out the work. And I think your comment is worth reiterating that odor being what it is, it's and the nature of the way that the processed solids are removed from the site for disposal and sea shelled. There is an element of odor at the plant which will be unavoidable to some extent.
Yeah, I'll reiterate. I'm certainly uncomfortable in investing significant funds into it when we're not even sure that we can meet the public's interests in completely eliminating the odor. But I do feel we have a responsibility to look at it at least and consider it. Councillor DeAndrade.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm curious how, because it's not the first time that I hear this conversation, but I think for decision-making, it will be important that council understands what part represents the transfer to Seychelles and what part is the ongoing odor and how many months. I know summer is the peak. I believe that's what's the case, but right now I have no idea what the extent of the odor that is the transfer and the ongoing and the transfer is the majority of the time or which one. So it would be nice to get some quantification, some sort of for decision making, because I know people who live there, they suffer with that. So I want to be supportive. At the same time, I agree with you, Mayor, that depending on the scale, it's not worth it. But I would like if staff could present something more tangible.
Thanks, yeah. Living in the neighborhood and walking there quite a bit, I can say, in my experience, most days it's fine. Most days I can take a deep breath of fresh air down at the tennis courts, and especially recently. But yeah, other days clearly it's not. CAO, did you want to speak to that? I thought I saw.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I understand you were mentioned earlier that we were going to be bringing another report on this fund. I do know that we do have some recent information on where other options exist. So I think we could bring you some additional information on that, including some level of comfort that what we would be getting for that type of investment. So we can commit to that.
Thanks. And did other councillors have any questions on capital projects or other projects we should be looking into? I did have a couple more. Yeah, and some are just things that maybe we should be looking at for the next several years. I've been thinking about the strategic plan a bit too, so they might be things to come up more in that context. But we've got. When I reviewed the survey, I was actually surprised at how little the off-leash dog park came up. It came up once, I think, when I read the survey. It's obviously a concern of some people in town who are very passionate about it. I've talked to one resident who's got some ideas and was working on an online survey, but unfortunately he put out an online survey, and almost all of the people who signed it are not only off coast but not even in the country. So that's kind of that's a risk of putting out an online survey. But I do think it's something worth looking at opportunities in the coming months and years if ideas come up. But clearly there's not really a site that people that between staff and the public there's a really strong consensus on right now. Councillor Kroll.
Something I did mention to you, and it came up. I haven't had any follow-up on it since it first came up with me, but there was some fairly serious expression of a playground in the Upper Village. Currently, the only real playground is the one at the schoolyard. We have a sort of a density of housing along Church Road. Park Road, sorry.
Yeah.
Thinking where the church is on the corner,
Yeah.
Park Road. But there is a fairly large residential area there. There's Brothers Park. It has a skateboard facility, but there's no actual real playground. And something I would like to investigate if we have the opportunity is Canadian Tire have a project where they're creating accessible playgrounds. And with the Accessibility Committee, it was one of the things I would like to bring up with them, is that we investigate the potential of seeing if we can get funding through Canadian Tire for an accessible playground, if we can find a place in the Upper Village to place it.
Mm-hmm. And I think both Gibsons Elementary and Cedar Grove Elementary received that funding too. Is it like it's primarily for the surface? I believe, is that correct?
It's accessibility to the extent that parents who have accessibility issues can access the park to, engage with their children, but also like children who are in wheelchairs or other devices can actually access play devices, which most playgrounds don't afford them.
And speaking of Park Road, traffic calming on Park Road also came up, and I don't think that's like, right immediate on our radar right now, and we're dealing with another endless traffic calming conversation in town. But that might be the next one, and I am interested in. It does. I think it's a legitimate concern that people. It makes sense that people are probably. Ferry traffic is using that as a route and speeding through it when there is some dense housing there, and there's more dense housing there with the new Maplewood development that includes, I know, was kind of some of that housing was family oriented. So I think that's a legitimate concern, looking at traffic calming there. So I'll raise that to staff at the meeting. I don't know if I don't think we're necessarily ready to spend the grant on that yet, but I think it's something that I think it's worthwhile for staff to have a look at. I don't know if what kind of direction would really be appropriate to just thinking of council here, whether this is a priority for everybody, and maybe we've got our active transportation plan too, right? Coming up. Okay, Director of Infrastructure.
Thank you. Through his mayor, I think that could be addressed through the active transportation plan. There's also has been recommended for the 2024 budget. I'm not sure how if you've looked ahead to that, but there's a general traffic management plan that's been proposed for 2024 with the intention of kind of following behind the active transportation master plan to develop and look at developing a master plan for the road standards throughout town, which would include things like identifying areas where traffic calming may be warranted, and maybe any changes to traffic patterns that may have come up, and trying to standardize how we are approaching traffic calming as well. So it's not kind of as a feeling quite so ad hoc. So if there's an appetite for a patience on that particular item, I think between the active transportation plan and then that traffic master plan, that could be the right direction to get clarity on the best approach for Park Road.
Perfect. Yeah, sounds good. And another one related to that too is at least one of the survey responses raised the bike path on Reed Road that currently ends at Park, I guess, and continuing that from Park to North. I don't know if there are other plans for that right now, so Director of Infrastructure, or if that would also just fit into the same answer, basically.
Thank you. In general, the plan would be to continue, I think, continuity. It would be important rather than having a change in kind of the style of that path from west to east. I think continuity would be important regardless of kind of a new direction. There is money for that multi-use path that's in the capital plan, I believe, in year 2025, with the intention of having the timing of that align with the timing of the replacement of the water main on Reed Road, which is in need of replacement. So just for sequencing and efficiency's sake, the plan would be to replace the water main and do that multi-use path. And right now we've got that scheduled for 2025, I believe.
Awesome, thanks. Councillor Lumley.
Yeah, I was just trying to remember, there was two developments. One was right on the corner of Park Road, and then one was further down. That was presented to the last council. And those both include upgrades and obviously continuing that path along there. I don't know if those people are still if those applications for development are still active, or, because that would certainly help. I imagine you'd start replacing the water main and multi-use paths at that point.
Director?
If I may, through you as mayor, there are a couple of approaches. One could be to wait and see if that development does come forth. Another option could be to fund that and effectively have a latecomer agreement on the development properties. Whereas if they were to then develop the land, they would contribute to the portion of the frontage improvements that otherwise would have been constructed as a part of their servicing agreement.
Okay, thanks. Any other final questions or suggestions from council about looking at our current list of capital projects and possible future ones? Okay, seeing none. Our next meeting is of Committee of the Whole anyway, is April the 18th, 2023 at 3 p.m. And I'll look for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Kroll. All those in favor? The motion carries. Thank you.